was a little over a year ago that my husband and I came to Florida after I confessed to him that I was having an affair with a pastor on staff at our church. And at the time of that confession, I wasn't sure what our future was going to look like. I can't say at that moment I felt real repentant. My mind was still confused, being tormented, but I knew I needed to confess because I knew I had gotten myself into something that I was not going to be able to get out on my own.
Because God didn't want there to be any doubt that He was orchestrating everything, He actually began working in my heart about a month before this confession, and basically just showed me that I wasn't loving my wife the way that Christ had loved the church, and I wasn't living with her in an understanding way. And He began to work those things through me in my heart, and it was those things that allowed me to be able to even deal with this. And I remember there was a point in that time that, especially around the confession time, that I just told God, I said, I can't do this. This is too much. And I believe that that's exactly where He wanted me to be. That way that He could actually take control of the situation. And He showed me the mercy that He had for me. There were about 3 days that I was tormented after the confession, and it was very difficult. And I don't want to say that it was just over at that point, but at that point He showed me that He desires mercy. He's not a God that just folds His arms and looks down and says, well, okay, you're forgiven, stop doing it. His arms were wide open. He was loving me into his being. And as I looked at my wife and what had gone on in our life, there was just no way that I could not have compassion on her the way that Jesus did me. And so that was so freeing to both of us, to be able to offer each other and to desire to give each other mercy the same way that Jesus did us.
Well, and when we left for Florida, I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. I knew I wanted out. I just didn't know how to get out. And I really didn't know who to turn to but my husband, even though he was the one that I hurt and offended. But he graciously took me away for 7 days, and we went to a place on the beach that was kind of secluded during that time. And I would go and sit on the ocean in the morning, and he would be spending time with God in our hotel room while I was out on the ocean. I knew that the Lord had said, I am your wonderful counselor, and that we needed to go hear what He needed to say to us at that time. Those first few days on the ocean, I had moments that it would have been easier just to run into the waves and kind of, get lost. But I kept hearing the Lord say, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. At the time of my confession, it looked and it appeared to be that ministry in my life was growing. I was launching an adoption agency, helping our church start an orphan care ministry, and I didn't realize at the time how much my identity was being found in ministry. And so when this situation happened with the adultery, I got blindsided. But the beautiful thing about that is when I hit bottom and was able to be real and be honest, and I really had no choice because they announced it a week later from our pulpit at a church with about 3,000 people. And even though they didn't say my name, they fired the pastor on staff. A lot of people knew it was me because we were working together. And so I had no choice but to come clean really about struggles that I had in my life and in my heart for years, but kept trying to say, if I'm just faithful, if I can do this, we're going to be okay. And finally, I got off that treadmill and crashed, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I began doing a lot of just reading on that looked to restoration and be healed and restored. And I stumbled upon the Gospel Coalition website, and I started reading articles and listening to messages about this grace message that did feel a little radical to me. And although I had heard the grace message before and I believed in the grace of God, something about the message went a little deeper for me, like to the point of saying, I need to hear what these men and women are saying. There's something here that I've missed. And you know, as I began reading those blogs and listening to those messages, I realized that what I was hearing and reading is what my husband had already started me a month before my confession.
Well, it wasn't easy. There were still several things that we needed to work through, but I really felt as though God was exclusively meeting us at that week that we were in Florida. And I counted a privilege that I was able to hold my wife's hand while she was going through some of these things. And I was also going through some things, and it was just so freeing to be able to love her, like Hosea 3 says. God told Hosea to go and love your wife. And I just really felt that. And when we returned home, it was a pretty scary thing to go back into where we were coming from. And one of the first things that we did was spoke to each of our children. And my son just looked at us when we were done telling them what God had taken. And he said, well, I can see a difference because I've never seen the two of you look at each other the way you do that. And it was just beautiful. What the devil had intended to turn ugly, God restored and redeemed the beauty in each of us and in our marriage.
Now, we were only gone a week, and I know that seems crazy that much could happen in 7 days. And we don't want to make it sound like there was that, because there has been a process. We went into counseling. We had to rebuild and restore a marriage that had some issues before that happened. But God met us powerfully in those 7 days, and I was able to mourn and grieve in my husband's arms. I was able to be honest with him. And when you have that kind of transparency and that kind of mercy being poured out on you, my husband made me look at him in the eyes every day for those 7 days, and he would say, Candace, I forgive you, and I delight to offer you mercy. I felt like I was looking at Jesus. And it changed me. And when you meet the kind of mercy that Jesus has, you will worship him with all of your heart, with all of your mind, with all of your strength, and with all of your soul. I had lived most of my life, really, we're at the Liberate conference, and what I'm hearing is I have lived most of my life trying to do it and trying to improve. And it was so refreshing to be able to say, I can't do this, and just completely surrender to the grace of God.